This episode of the Linux Action Show is brought to you by the good-looking folks at GoDaddy.com. Use our code Linux and save yourself some cash. And welcome to the Linux Action Show, Season 24, Episode 1. My name is Chris.
And my name is Matt.
Matt, are you ready for a big show this week?
I'm ready.
All right, well, in the second half of the show, we're reviewing Ubuntu 12.10. And we have some interesting thoughts that we'll share with you folks, so stay tuned for that. In the first half of the show, it's our news segment. And we're going to break down the whole thing between Nvidia and the kernel developers that broke this week, as well as some other very interesting Linux stories, including some interesting news for Arch users. So stay tuned for that. And, of course, we have our picks coming up right now, and then at the end of the show, we'll get to some email. We got some good emails for folks that have had issues with RARs on Linux, folks that have had issues with Compas crashing on them, things like that. Stay tuned to our feedback segment, which will be coming up towards the end of the show.
Make sure to check that out.
All right, Matt, should I go through the picks?
Let's get
You
to
ready?
it.
All right. The first one for my Runs Linux pick this week is the Ben NanoNote Runs Linux. This is a pretty cool little device.
It's cool. It's like, yeah, I'm definitely going with shrink ray on this one.
Yeah, it's like somebody took a laptop and just shrunk the heck out of it. It's about, I mean, it would fit, it looks like a laptop that would fit in the palm of your hand. It's very, very small. You're only going to be able to use one or two fingers to type on this thing. Now, it is an open hardware platform. It's 100 millimeters wide and 17 millimeters thick. Okay. It has a 3-inch display. All right, and it runs not your traditional Linux distribution. It actually runs OpenWRT, like the router stuff.
That might be a good thing, actually.
Well,
depending, yes and no. Although it's kind of ironic, being it runs that and doesn't include a certain thing that is usually associated with that, such as wireless.
Well, there's that. It is. But the reason why it runs OpenWRT is because we're not dealing with a ton of horsepower. Now we're talking $99. This thing is MIPS CPU architecture, so you won't be running Ubuntu or most Linux distros on that. CPU runs at 336 megahertz. It's overclocked though. You can overclock it just by software to 480 megahertz. So that's awesome.
That's pretty cool.
Now get this, it's rocking 32 megabytes of SD RAM, 2 gigs of flash, a small speaker, a microphone, mini USB, and it gets around 12 hours of battery life.
It's not bad. Okay.
We actually had this, I believe, this was emailed into the show by, I think it was Justin.
Okay.
And he wanted to see, Runs Linux was sent in by Justin. Yep, he wanted to say that he listens to the Jupiter Broadcasting shows on his NanoNote.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it's usable. OMG Ubuntu, as well as many others, have some reviews up. But, it's got a wide variety of support. They have a picture of a guy here at a conference. I could almost see it as a little conference machine.
For note taking or something like that, I think it's certainly a lot more intuitive than a touchpad.
Keeping up on your email with 12 hours of battery life and a keyboard. Yeah, it might not be so bad. It's not like you're not shelling out like $400.
No. But the fact that my understanding is you have to tether in order to get connectivity does generally mean you're going to have to connect to something besides, like another laptop or something like that. Just saying. I wonder
if that mini USB port could be utilized in some fashion.
Just something to give it connectivity. It would just get so much more value, I think.
Yeah. So, all right, Matt. Now, we have some great picks this week, including my Android pick. I haven't picked a paid app in, I want to say, maybe 3 to 6 months.
Wow.
But I've gotten one of the number one requests I get is, can you tell me what podcast manager you use? And as a podcaster, I'm very, very picky about my podcast managers for my smartphones.
Right.
And I have transitioned. I don't even listen to podcasts on desktops. I don't use any software on my desktop.
I'm the total opposite.
I used to be too.
Yeah,
I used to be too.
It's interesting.
Now with my new app, I'm 100% Android to manage my podcast. No kidding. So I'll tell you about that in just a second.
Okay.
Listen to that. And we've got a really, really great desktop pick, which I think is going to be germane for users in the next couple of weeks. I'll tell you more about that. But first, before we go on, I want to say good morning to GoDaddy.com.
Woohoo!
And Danica texted me last night.
Oh, yeah?
And she says, look, Chris, I got a couple things I need to talk to you about. She says, number one, I'm changing my outfit. I need to get your opinion. So she sends me a text, an SMS picture, which unfortunately Google Voice does not support. So I write back to Danica. I say, you got to email it to me.
Right.
So now we're emailing, which is great. And she's got a new outfit. You can go check it out at GoDaddy.com. You might tell me what you think about it.
She's
good. Liking it. I'm liking it.
I think it looks great.
Well, there you go. And I reminded her, because the other thing she wanted to talk to me about is she is setting up a really spooky pumpkin patch for the kids in her. Spooky, Matt, cool. Spooky pumpkin patch. So she wanted to get a good deal deal on a .com domain because honestly, Danica's got to spend a lot of money on tires. She can't be blowing money on .coms.
Right.
So I said, well, here's what you can do, Danica. Go over to GoDaddy.com. You've probably heard of it. And when you're over at GoDaddy.com, use our code 599 Linux when you check out. If you use that code 599 Linux when you check out, you'll get that .com for $5.99.
Ooh, that's not bad.
Yeah, but you know what she said to me? She said, thank you, I'm going to do that, but here's the problem. I've noticed while I'm in here, I've got some renewals I need to do. I'd like to maybe get some hosting. Can you help me take some money off the top? She says, got to take some money off the top. I said, here's what we can do for you, Danica. We're going to take 20% off the top of anything you buy at GoDaddy.com if you use our limited time bonus promo code, which will only be available to the end of the month.
Ooh, got to get on that.
Go20 off 6.
Nice.
Go20 off 6. And see if tell me, Matt. Now
that's good when you're re-upping domains. Let me tell you.
I just want to let's see here. If I could just maybe position things a little bit. I just want to get your opinion on something.
Okay, that's good.
So let me
let's
see
get that figured out here.
What do you think about me and Pink here a little bit? So there we go. Here we go. What do you think, Matt? What do you think? Hello, I'm Chris Patrick, and I'd like to tell you about GoDaddy.com.
Oh no! Oh,
no, you like
mental image won't go away. Oh god! Oh help!
So thank you to GoDaddy.com
Stop.
for sponsoring this week's episode of the Linux Action Show and for their longtime support of the show.
Oh my!
So, anyways, I thought I looked good in pink, but there you go.
Yeah, that's going to stick with me for a while.
All right, so let me tell you about my Android pick this week. Now, I had you look at it before the show.
Yeah, no, it was cool.
So here, you can play with it while I talk about it too.
Cool.
So it's called Pocket Cast, and this is a $3.12 app in US. Now, the chat room says they're not going to be able to sleep well tonight. Pocket Cast is, as I suggested, a podcast manager. But it does a couple of things that I think should be fundamental required features. And by the way, another great one that I've used for a long time is BeyondPod. So if you don't want to spend money and you still want a good one, go check out BeyondPod. I've sort of moved away from Dog Catcher, and I've transitioned to this. So Pocket Cast, here's something that's great. Imports your podcast from Google Reader. So if you have like a OPML
that's
feed,
nice.
yeah,
Okay.
you can just pop it right in there. It's super easy. Has a sleep timer, which is nice if you have a podcast that helps you doze off at night. Of course, not one of ours. Has a widget for controlling playback on the home screen. Here's the really important one, especially in my Evo, though. It gives you the option to choose if you want to download the podcast to the phone storage or to the SD card storage.
Oh, no kidding. So
Yeah,
you get
yeah.
some choices, though.
Yeah,
that's
so and
that's
I'm
kind of a big deal.
Yeah, and I'm really tight on space. And the podcast apps that don't let you choose that, they got to go, in my opinion.
Yeah,
now, so those are sort of like the fancy technical features.
Right.
Here's the feature that I was curious how this would work, and I actually ended up really liking it. Is one of the technical things they do differently is all of the RSS feeds are refreshed and cached server side by them. That's one of the reasons why this app costs some money.
Oh, seriously?
So
okay.
they call it, like cloud feeds or something like that.
Right.
So you import the feeds here, and then then their server goes and fetches
So
them.
that basically is taking away some overhead from your phone. Okay.
A lot of overhead. So if you
Yeah.
listen to a lot of podcasts,
Right.
one of the problems that will happen on Android phones is they'll start checking the feeds in the background, and just the action of going out, doing all these HTTP requests, pulling down the latest feeds takes battery life, right?
Exactly.
Whereas now this is just one call to the remote server, and it gets all the results. The
it.
other result of that is when you go into a new podcast, you instantaneously see the new episodes. You don't have to refresh; they're all immediately there because they've already refreshed it server
nice.
side. Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah.
I mean, even just compared to a desktop app, that's nice.
It's
that's
immediate, right?
Just great.
They also have the option you can stream it. So if you want to download something, you can do that, and you can save it to your SD card. But if you just want to play it over the web connection, you can just stream. You don't even have to download it. So that's really nice. And they have options for sending media to different places. Finding all of our shows is super easy. You just search for them by name, and you can add them. So if you want to get started with this app, you can do that. They do have a podcast networks directory. We're not listed in there, but I'm going to email those guys to try to get that changed.
Get that corrected.
Yeah, I'd love to see our stuff in there.
Super.
So there you go. It's called Pocket Cast.
It's got a great layout. I mean, it's real clean. It's easy to find. You got your categories. You got your
the
topics.
UI is fantastic. They have the way they list out all of your podcasts. They have some really, like, for some reason it didn't pull down the Linux Action Show artwork, but they have like this really classy kind of like frame they put it in, so it still looks really good. And you probably can't see this on camera, but they lay out all of you can't really. They lay out all of the podcasts really nicely, and they use the album art for discovery, and it's just a nice grid view. Also during playback, although of course you'd never do this to our show, they have options for like 30-second skip. So if you need to, like, if the topic's boring you, or for some reason you need to skip ahead by a little bit, you can just tap the edges of the screen and it'll jump ahead 30 seconds or 10 seconds. So it's kind of like flipping pages on the Kindle. You just tap the sides. Yeah,
that's cool. No, I love that, because I mean, especially if you're in the middle of doing something else and you just need to do it quickly.
Or like, oh, what did they say? Let me go back 10 seconds.
Right.
I love that, right? Because the 10-second back is just enough time to say, oh, what was that URL they just said?
Exactly.
So that's what's, and it's just one tap away. So it's a really, really fantastic podcast manager. And because of the way they do that server-side caching, I believe, and I don't really have any hard data to show this, but I believe it's actually using less battery life.
Oh, I would think so.
So
I mean, there's less calls going back and forth.
And on these older phones too, like Dogcatcher, when it would go update all my feeds, would just slow my phone down to a crawl. You can also, although I've turned it off, you can opt in to get little notifications when a new podcast is available. So you can just tap in your notifications area and load the new podcast.
That's pretty cool. Well, and I think you really sold me on the battery life. That's really cool.
So again, that's called Pocket Cast, and it's from Shifty Jelly Software. And I'll just put a link in the live chat room.
And what'd you say? It runs like what, $2-3 or something?
Yeah, $3.12 US. So
it's a no-brainer if you're really into podcasts.
Yeah, it's got 4.5 stars, almost 5 stars. Yeah. Great app. Now, of course, there are some good free ones out there. See, the other reason why I started looking is Google Listen is being phased out. That's the Google podcast app.
Sure.
And so that's what I used to use, and then I started shopping around. So there you go.
Looks good to me.
And of course, just a reminder, we do have Jupiter Broadcasting Android apps. Go search the Android, the Play Store, whatever. I hate that name. Go search the Play Store for Jupiter Broadcasting. There's a couple of great apps in there for getting our shows. One that focuses on audio and one that's focusing on video. So
sweet.
That's really awesome.
Worth getting.
And you can also watch us live. Just join us Sundays at 10 a.m. over at jblive.tv. That's 10 a.m. Pacific. Yeah. All right, Matt.
All right.
If I have a track record of making some predictions, I sometimes don't want to go on the record because like I got a good track record. Right. I don't want to spoil it. Right?
You don't want to mess it up. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I'm going to go on the record and say that I think Gamecaster, which is our desktop app pick this week, we've talked about it, but we've never made it a pick. And they just released a new version which supports Ubuntu 12.10, so it's relevant for this show.
Good.
And Gamecaster is a really well done program. It's got a GTK interface that lets you capture anything that's really using your OpenGL subsystem for video. So obviously video games like you've used it, right?
I've played with it. So I mean, from my experience, where it differs from Kazam is that it's not targeting the desktop. It's not targeting that. It's actually just grabbing gameplay and game audio only.
Right. It's
really cool.
literally communicating with the OpenGL layer and then grabbing
and then actually saves it to a specific file to that program that you can then take and actually export it to something you can work with the video editor.
Let's just say that in the next 2 weeks, maybe like next week or maybe the end of this week, some big gaming software maker releases some big gaming platform for Linux, and then you get a chance to get in that beta and you want to capture your ultimate frag session.
Exactly.
Gamecaster would be a great way to do it. Now, it is available for other distros, but if you are running 12.04 or 12.10 of Ubuntu, there is a PPA in the show notes that you can add and get the latest version of Gamecaster.
For everybody.
I've used this, and it works so well. In fact, I had this issue where for some reason my display was drawing all screwed up, like braid or something was just all screwed up. However, because this was capturing at the actual OpenGL level, the recorded version, totally fine.
Oh, no kidding.
It's
well,
totally
that's kind of
fine.
cool for troubleshooting.
Yeah, so go check out Gamecaster, get that loaded on your machine, and then if you record an ultimate frag session, upload it to YouTube and send us in a link, and maybe we'll cover it in the feedback segment.
Definitely. Looks good.
Okay. So since we're reviewing Ubuntu 12.10 this week, I thought we'd stay on that theme when we go to the distro pick. Yep. And I think this one might be one that is interesting to you.
Yes. Yep.
And that is Lubuntu. I think I'm saying that right?
I think so.
Lubuntu. Yeah. So this is a fast and lightweight operating system that's based on Ubuntu. And of course, they'll be releasing 12.10 version in just a couple of days as well. Only it uses the LXDE desktop as its primary interface. And also, in some cases, they've substituted some of the default apps for lighter weight
Generally, they will. Yeah, generally they will. And which is cool.
Have you played with this?
I have not played with it as much as I have Xubuntu or whatever you call it. But
Ubuntu?
Xubuntu, whatever you want, whatever their fancy terminology is for it. But one thing I have noticed is that for some of my older PCs, like I have an old HP Pavilion, runs like a rock star because it's so lightweight. And the apps run well on it because they're designed for a lightweight desktop.
Now, Matt, I think you're in this camp.
Yes.
You like the Ubuntu underpinnings a lot.
I do.
But you're kind of...
I'm not married to any one desktop.
Yeah.
I will, sometimes I'll do a KDE. Sometimes I'll go wherever, but I don't, I'm not, it's the core that I like.
Yeah, this is kind of a thing. Well, and you look at how many distributions are based off of Ubuntu. I think a lot of people agree with you on that. This is kind of an interesting route. And with gaming becoming more and more of a thing, on Ubuntu and Unity having a
Right.
performance cost,
Exactly.
I think things like Lubuntu are going to get and Ubuntu are going to get a lot more attention.
Oh yeah, it's where I would game. Regardless of the computer, I would definitely be gaming on this because of the fact you're not at. Why add the overhead if you don't have to?
Yeah, so
Easy.
you end up running a desktop that has full quote unquote Valve support.
Yeah.
For trying out Steam apps.
Exactly.
And you don't have the overhead of Unity. So
Have your cake, eat it too.
that is Lubuntu, and of course Ubuntu is probably worth an honorable mention.
And that's what I'm running on my main desktop right now. I'm real happy with it.
Really?
Really happy with it. Just couldn't be happier.
Wow, check that out.
Yeah.
Check that out. All right, Matt. Well, one thing probably worth mentioning before we run out of here and get to the news is we have an awesome subreddit that I'd like to encourage everyone to go to. And it's really been picking up. There's been some great conversations in there and some good threads that get a lot
Very
of
good
participation. And to be honest, as we sunset the Jupiter Colony forums, this is probably the best place for those conversations to go in a lot of cases. So go over to linuxactionshow.reddit.com and check out our awesome subreddit where you can submit stories to the show. You can vote on things. You can start conversation threads that you want to work their way into the show.
Exactly.
And if you're a GNOME 3 user, there's been some great GNOME 3 threads recently about people's favorite extensions. I think we might collect some of that and make a show out of it.
I think it's worthwhile too. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's something I was thinking about.
So go check out linuxactionshow.reddit.com.
Nice.
All right, Matt.
All right.
Let's do the news.
So, what's new in the news?
All right, Matt, our top story in the news docket goes out to our Arch fans out there because I know there's a lot of Arch love in the audience. And that is, it is official. I think we talked about the Systemd transition towards the beginning of last season.
We did.
Well, it's official now. New installations of Arch Linux will be installed using Systemd. If you have an existing install, this doesn't actually really apply to you. But
Sure.
Here's the very brief announcement. The base group now contains Systemd-systemv compat package. This means all new installations will boot Systemd by default. As some packages still lack native Systemd units, users can install the initscripts package and use daemons array in the etcrc.conf to start services.
Oh, that's handy. Okay.
Yeah, this change will not affect existing installations for the time being. Initscripts and sysinit packages remain available from our repos. However, individual packages may now start relying on system being booted with Systemd. So that's something to expect, as you might see as new stuff hits the Arch repos that some of the lower level stuff might be expecting Systemd.
It's pretty cool, though. I like how they implemented that.
It is interesting. And something to reflect on in our Ubuntu 12.10 review is Canonical has made a concentrated effort not to go with Systemd.
They did.
And Mark even addressed that in his blog post announcing Ubuntu 12.10 was that they were sticking with Upstart more than ever. Now, we're seeing a lot of distributions move over to Systemd. Ubuntu calls it maybe not ready yet, but I think maybe that's a little hard to swallow at this point.
Yeah, I don't have an opinion on it till I see more time spent with both and actually comparing them side by side.
Yeah.
I think once we have a little more data on both, then I can make a more educated decision. At this point, it hasn't really struck me either way.
Yeah.
And
I'm sure there's some differences in how you configure some of the essentials, but overall, people always hate change, but this one makes a lot of sense. And anything that brings Arch in line with a lot of what the other distros is doing,
it's smart.
That makes a lot of sense too.
Yeah.
All right, Matt. Now, this next story is pretty interesting because you kind of have to wonder if it sort of renders Microsoft's whole SecureBoot thing a bit moot.
Yeah.
Now, here we go. So, the Linux Foundation has come up with a SecureBoot plan for distros that haven't been able to come up with their own workaround.
Oh, that's cool.
We've heard OpenSUSE and Fedora and Ubuntu all sort of have these plans for like a one-stage bootloader, then load something else, or a signed grub. They have these different approaches. Well, the Linux Foundation is going to create a signed bootloader by them that anybody can use.
Now, wouldn't it make sense to just ditch all these other little side-by-side efforts and just go with a unified?
We'll see.
You know what I mean?
I think what's going to come down to is
what they're doing.
So here's maybe why they won't, because it's one small little user inconvenience. Plus, the other guys have already got their stuff in place. But check this out. Anybody, I think, could grab this bootloader and sign, they grab this signed bootloader, they can load any operating system, they can load anything. It doesn't have to be Linux. So anybody can grab this.
Yeah.
So what the Linux Foundation is doing to make it secure is they're making it require user prompt to continue. So they're saying, we're not going to load malware because the user will have to select continue to continue.
So this is basically like a pre-boot UAC for, for Linux. I mean, that's essentially what you're telling me. I mean, it's like, wait a minute, what?
I guess so.
I mean, obviously this is before, a totally different situation, but it's the same kind of mindset of, oh, well, that's secure because I have to hit OK. I mean,
right. Well, you know what it is? They're just trying to come up with something. It says it's designed to be as small as possible, leaving all of the work to the real bootloader. The real bootloader must be installed on the same partition as the pre-bootloader, which could get a little tricky, with a known path to loader.efi. The pre-bootloader will attempt to execute a binary, and if that succeeds, the system will just boot normally.
Okay. Well, in fairness to them, though, I mean, I kind of ripped on them, but in fairness, at the end of the day, we all know it's bunk anyway. So, I mean, the whole point of it is just to get the system booted up.
Yeah,
that's our end goal here.
They are
if it's doing that, cool.
I don't know if they're coming out and exactly saying this, but it's implying that they're admitting this is sort of a patch fix because the industry's, on October 26th, Windows 8 comes out.
Right.
And there's this whole slew of hardware that's supposed to come out with it that's going to have the Windows, that's going to participate in the Windows 8 logo program and require this secure boot. So I understand they're just trying to react. And what's nice is what the Linux Foundation has done is they've given an option to the smaller distributions.
That is cool.
That don't have the R&D to come up with
allows them to boot. I mean, allows them to boot on these computers.
Yeah.
That's kind of important.
That's kind of key.
Yeah, I give them points on that.
And honestly, it shows you how easy it is to actually work around this secure boot system because it just takes one bootloader like this to be signed, and if anybody can use it.
Yeah, so I mean, really, it serves two purposes. It shows how ridiculous Microsoft's idea is, and it allows people to run the Linux distribution of their choice.
I think so. Yeah.
Awesome. I'm good with that. Yeah.
All right, Matt. So let's talk about this next story.
Okay.
This sort of a low-level story, and you might have saw this Brew HaHa that cropped up between Nvidia and the kernel developers this week when Nvidia asked for GPL markings to be removed from a specific type of kernel interface.
It's like this just.
Right, so here's what it is. Starting with kernel 3.5, I believe it's 3.5, there's this new feature called DMA buff.
Right.
And it's an interface that was merged, it was kernel 3.3. It provides an infrastructure to enable multiple drivers to share a DMA buffer.
Okay.
Here's what that means in real world. I'll give you two examples.
All right, cool.
Example number one is picture an Android handset. And you got your Android handset here, and you're taking a picture.
Sure.
Well, what's going on in under the scenes is there is an image processor that is grabbing the input from the camera, right? And it's encoding it locally.
Okay.
And then there's a second process that's taking that and displaying it to the frame buffer and giving you a live feed of what's going on.
Okay, right.
So right now, these two different activities are not really working in conjunction. Wouldn't it be nice if the camera's processor could send this one feed to both the encoder and the live feed? So
more efficient.
If different devices could sort of communicate better. Here's a better, more practical example.
All right.
NVIDIA Optimus. So imagine you have a laptop that has the Intel 4000 card, the embedded, and you have an NVIDIA CPU. Okay. And you want to be able to transition between those two smoothly, and you want to have the workload that's happening on the Intel automatically be able to transfer over to the NVIDIA.
Right.
And then when the NVIDIA card's done with that workload, you want to be able to easily segue back.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So what NVIDIA can do is they could engineer and develop a whole extra module that they would plug into their driver.
Sure.
They would do this logic and sort of do it in an outside method, outside the kernel, and then just send it where it needs to go.
Yeah.
Or they could take advantage of this DMA_buff, which is specifically designed to do this, and use that to do all of that inner driver communication.
Much more cleanly. Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And it also provides for better performance and all kinds of things.
Yeah.
But because the NVIDIA driver is proprietary and the Linux kernel is GPL,
right,
the two shall not meet, right?
Exactly. So they're butting heads on that.
So what NVIDIA is saying is, can you take just this new interface module that, and they talked about, actually, this was even discussed by the Linux team, the kernel team, back in January when this thing was developed. They said, can you just take this and you just take the GPL markings off that little piece, and then we'll just, and I can see NVIDIA's point, but I can also see the kernel team's point. And to that, Alan Cox, and he has one of the best. Alan Cox really sums it up great here. I got to read this to you. So Alan Cox, of course, long time kernel contributor and rights owner of many parts of the kernel.
Sure.
He says. Here's his quote. He says, "This isn't a reply out to the Linux kernel mailing list from NVIDIA to make this to mark that API non-GPL." He says, "This needs at the very least approval of the rights holders for files concerned and all code exposed by this change. Also, I'd note if you're trying to do this for the purpose of combining it with proprietary code, then you are still, in my view, as a and many others he puts in parentheses, as a rights holder to the Linux kernel likely to be in breach of the GPL requirements for derivative work, you may consider that a formal notification of my viewpoint. Your corporate legal team will explain to you why that fact that you are now aware of my viewpoint is important to them.
You know, someone's got to give somewhere, and I don't know who should be giving where or what should be giving how. You know, I think at the end of the day, it's going to have to be NVIDIA accepting the fact that they're going to have to give a little here.
Yeah.
They just are, because it's not going to happen from the kernel team. It's just not going to.
You know, what the hell is in this this driver code that they can't open source?
Well,
is the competitive advantage their hardware, or is their competitive advantage their driver?
Well, and like they don't have people, you know, for their competitors actually backwards engineering this stuff without access to that anyway. It's not,
Look at that, yeah.
Any advantage to restricting that is so painfully ridiculous, in my opinion. I'm not buying that it's actually benefiting them as much as they think it does. I just don't buy that.
It might just come down to legally they can't share some of what's in there, and that would make sense, and that's unfortunate because that shows you the long-term cost of a company not innovating internally.
Yeah, that could actually be it.
You know, and also Red Hat engineers have chimed in and said they also agree with Alan Cox's view and say that this would be a violation. And what I looked into, because my first thought is why couldn't Nvidia make their end of the connector GPL?
Right.
So that way it's GPL code touching GPL. What Nvidia claims is that connector would then touch too many internal parts of the driver that they would also then have sort of a ripple down effect that they would likely then have to GPL, and they can't do that.
This is where, and the licensing stuff, it's where it just loses me. It's like, for the love of Pete, just make it work.
I know.
I mean, it's just like, come on. I mean, this is so dumb. The fact that we're still having these stages, and I'm sure the NVIDIA's thinking, boy, I can't wait to get started on this now. Or, you know, the Linux kernel team's thinking, oh, great, now we got to deal with more NVIDIA nonsense.
Yeah.
We're going nowhere here. And I'm not saying one side's more correct over another. It's just, this is so stupid.
And it's, gosh,
come on, guys, figure it out.
I know. And at the end of the day,
Really?
you know, as an end user, I don't know who I should be mad at. I'm a little mad at the kernel guys because I want my driver
I use
stuff to work
ATI
right.
cards. I don't care. You know, at this point, I mean, literally to that point, I'm so fed up with it that I will on notebooks. I will happily, with a smile on my face, use Intel powered graphics.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not as powerful. It's a notebook. It's not. I'm not gaming on it. Who cares?
Yeah.
And as far as the whole desktop thing, whoever's not pulling this crap with me, my business is going over that direction.
Yeah.
That being said, as is, even still, NVIDIA cards work fine on desktop computers.
Yeah,
you know,
that's the thing, right?
So it's like, yeah, this is so low level that it's, you know, I think Joe Average is not going to care, and I think pretty much this is very enthusiast oriented. It's very, very.
I agree. It does have a trickle down effect that if they could come to some sort of agreement, it would mean a better graphics experience for end users.
Yeah.
And that would be nice.
Yeah, and if it's actually putting a lot of significant heat and overhead on your current setup, then that is significant. I'll give you points for that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know.
While we're talking drivers, so the reason why I think this is maybe a little more of a hot topic than it has been in the past is because it's undeniable Linux gaming is actually starting to heat up.
Yeah.
And to that end, Canonical is trying to think, very rightly so, trying to get a little recognition for some of the work they're doing to make gaming better on Ubuntu. And this is going to be interesting to see because a lot of the improvements they're making, they're backporting them to 12.04.
That's important.
So 12.04 users are actually about to see a bunch of really interesting upgrades come, and let me cover some of that stuff. So this is a blog post, and see, do we have the? I'm sorry, I'm such a bad person. I had his name, but it just blanked out.
We'll have links. It will have links in the
This is a blog post from a Canonical developer who's working closely. He works, he's responsible for, I believe he maintains the X packages for Ubuntu, and he's been working with NVIDIA and Intel. And I've gone through and I've highlighted a few parts here that I want to mention. He says several of us at Canonical, but even more at NVIDIA and Intel, have been working behind the scenes to make porting games to Ubuntu 12.04 more feasible and make gaming a bit easier in general. See, this is important. So you have a distribution maker that's actually reaching out with game makers and hardware vendors at the same time, trying to make their platform better. So that's good. For NVIDIA, now check this out. This is what they're actually going to be doing. This is what change users are going to see.
Okay.
For NVIDIA, we'll be introducing a new experimental package that you can install via the additional hardware configuration dialog. All right. So what they're doing is they're going to start matching up the Nvidia actual beta releases that Nvidia puts on their site, the Ubuntu 12.04 users will be able to subscribe to and stay current on the freshest Nvidia drivers. The first real beta driver will be packaged as Nvidia-experimental-310. So keep an eye out that if you want the latest stuff. We will introduce other Nvidia-experimental drivers as Nvidia releases new betas. These experimental driver packages will track all the beta releases from start to stable for one major driver series each. We'll be making these experimental driver packages available both on LTS and the current development release.
That's important. I love the fact that they're supporting both so readily.
And the reason they're doing this is what Canonical found when they went to the hardware, to the game makers, and they said, what can we do to make Ubuntu and Linux better for gaming? And they said, well, the way our development process works is we start sometimes a year or two ahead, and we are pushing, and we often have to work with ATI and Nvidia to add features to their driver to make things work in our games. So then when we release a game for Linux, we have to turn off all of these extra new features we've added because your drivers are 6 months old or a year old. And so the games can't have all the latest features. But if you could get the latest video card drivers, then we could incorporate the coolest stuff into our games.
Got to keep up on that bleeding edge stuff. That's really cool.
Canonical is acknowledging this, and so they're setting up a new process to get people the freshest graphics drivers as possible. They also note they probably won't ship every single beta that gets released from NVIDIA.
And that's okay. I mean, even if they're skipping an occasional,
they say they're going to try to get the key ones.
Okay. Yeah,
we'll get the key betas and the key milestones.
Here's a significant improvement. We're going to include it. I mean, that's cool.
And they also say they're going to keep working with game manufacturers. So if a game manufacturer says we need the specific beta driver out there for testing, they'll do that. Now, here's where it gets a little sticky. For AMD's proprietary driver, they plan to do something similar, but they've not even scratched the surface of what yet.
Right.
Now, the Intel side, because it is open source and it is more integrated at the kernel and X level, it's actually a little trickier to do this, surprisingly. You'd almost think it'd be easier, but the Intel driver is actually a little trickier. On the Intel side, they're using a bit of a different approach to achieve the same thing. Instead of using the additional hardware dialog like they'll be using for NVIDIA, they're going to provide updates to 12.04 through the regular X updates PPA. This is an existing PPA repo that you can get newer drivers and newer X updates. So they're going to take this existing PPA and they're going to extend this to have
like X SWAT or something like that.
Because they need to have like X11 components updated as well when they're doing the NVIDIA. So they say to support the full stack of an upgrade for the Intel graphics requires not only the DDX driver but also Mesa. The kernel driver and some dependencies. Intel's developers have been instrumental in identifying the package and packaging these components up, and they're currently being staged by Intel for testing on the Intel graphics update. So they're really working close with these guys.
That's really important. It's that see, that's where it really, the rubber hits the road, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Now, here's what they say. All of the above is geared for leading-edge adopters. So if you have 12.04 today, you're going to be able to get this stuff pretty soon because they want to help get that stuff packaged.
Okay.
For those waiting a bit, in a few months from now, we'll be rolling out a broader update called Ubuntu 12.04.2, which should include all of the above plus some.
I think that's probably what I would update to myself as far as like if I'm looking to do that kind of real underpinning key stuff under the hood like that. I'm probably going to, and I generally like to do that with any types of updates. I like to really get the core ones kind of put out into place. So that's cool.
Yeah.
And I think it's good that they approached it that way.
So very, very interesting development there.
Yes.
While we're on the topic of Ubuntu, let's cover the new donations page that was announced this week. OMG Ubuntu has a pretty good write-up on it.
They did, actually, yeah.
And this is obviously one of those things that's inspired from the Humble Bundle. And you have to kind of dig around to see it. Here, I'll bring it up in another tab here.
Yeah.
So when you're browsing Ubuntu.com, you won't actually even get prompted for this sucker until you go to the download page.
Well, and here's the thing, as far as myself's concerned, at the end of the day, I'm very much into the idea of Ubuntu getting the funding they need so they can progress. There's no free lunch. There's no free ride. Get over that right now. And those things that do offer those free lunch and free ride without any type of support generally don't last forever. So the fact that they have a donation page is awesome. But more importantly, this is the key piece that I think most people will probably miss, is that you get to decide where those dollars go.
That is a cool approach, isn't it?
Very, very important, because just hitting a donate button is cool if if it's a very singular thing. But with something as complex as Ubuntu, it's nice to say, hey, I really want these dollars to go to gaming support, or I really want these things to go to wireless support, or whatever the options are, and you can decide where that goes. Or you can say, I don't want to give you any money, and you can just take a freebie and then pay them later.
Yeah, you can do that too. And they say, well, we'd love you to submit bugs. I like too, as you add more money to it, they tell you what you'd be capable of buying for that money, and as you get really up there, it's the price of a pair of sexed emus. Emu chicks.
Okay. I didn't see the emu. Yeah. Anyway, that's good. That's that's good to know that it kind of equates it. Whether it's a lunch out or some emu chicks.
Do you think no take me to the download is just a little hard to find? It's got a lot of going on this page, and you got to scroll through this whole thing.
No, because it's orange on white. I mean, the contrast is there, quite frankly, my opinion. If you're using Ubuntu and you can afford to kick down a few bucks for the love, really, come on.
Creepy Uncle points out that he kind of misread this "make the desktop more amazing" as "make the desktop more Amazon."
They need that option actually, and like to have a little Amazon warrior that goes more Amazon as you slide the slider.
Oh man,
I would totally be all about supporting that.
So let's talk about the uncomfortable elephant in the room.
Okay,
is Canonical going broke?
No. What they're doing is they're trying to build a sustainable business model. Right now, they have money to do what they need to do, but it's not sustainable. There's not enough income coming in, and especially not enough diversified income coming in, especially for things like the desktop. Server stuff's doing its thing. The Amazon thing is, I don't see that lasting forever. So
I'll save my thoughts for the 12.10 review.
Yeah, this is a little more sustainable.
Now, this is an Ubuntu heavy episode, so don't give us grief because we're covering the Ubuntu stories because I think Valve's coming out soon, Steam, and it's the 12.10 review.
Exactly.
So for those of you who are dying, just stick with us. Yeah. I agree. It does kind of, when you're doing two money grabs at once, it does kind of send the smell of desperation. At the same time, though, maybe it's sending the messages, we're serious, we really need funding.
Well, and there's other distributions that are not Ubuntu that do similar things, but they don't do it as well. I've seen certain distributions that have done this with like faster repositories. I've seen other distributions that have done this to where maybe they're saying, hey, you get the beta release before everybody else. Everybody's got their own spin on this. It's not just a centric Ubuntu thing, but I think that this is good. I think if they can make this attractive and appealing, although I would also point out it's not real residual. It tends to be kind of a one-shot deal.
I don't have a problem with it. Right? Maybe that's what they hope.
But I give them huge points on saying I want, and I can't stress this enough, I want these dollars to go to these particular features or concerns.
I think what we have here is, cool. I think people at Canonical watch a lot of Jupiter Broadcasting because look what we do, right? We take donations from our audience, that's how we stay on the air, and then we ask people to keep kind of things leveled out by using our affiliates and our extensions.
Exactly.
So obviously, I can't get too much on a high horse here, but I actually think the way they're doing this is pretty decent. I like being able to choose where my money goes to. And, am I going to contribute? I don't know. We'll see how I use the Amazon affiliate stuff, and then we'll see which way I go on that.
Right.
But I again go back to, and I think this is where maybe a portion of the audience is going to disagree with me. I go back to, I want to make the desktop revenue generating for Canonical. That way they continue to focus on making it a good desktop. Yep. And I would argue the same for any distribution. I want the desktop to be something that is important on that spreadsheet. When the bean counters are looking at that spreadsheet, I want desktop users to matter on that spreadsheet.
I completely agree. And if they did some adjustments to the Amazon stuff, I could see that happening for video and audio. I definitely think for music and video, there's a lot of potential there. Make it a little more centralized, a little less on the lens.
And there's nothing. There's nothing. And it sounds greedy. It sounds, but until you go donation based, there is nothing like direct feedback from donations because people will cut funding, people will add funding when you do, and people will say a lot of things. People have told us, "Oh man, you guys should sell shirts. I'd buy a shirt," and we'll hear that a ton. And then we put shirts up for sale and we sell 20. Right. But when people vote with their wallet, they really are serious. So what'll be interesting to see is if this better coordination with Debian slider gets pushed up a lot. I have a feeling that slider is going to get moved a lot for a lot of people. I think so. And wouldn't that be an interesting way to tell Canonical that we're serious, that we think this is an important thing?
No, I think so. That's just it. It's if you want this to be a long-term thing and you want to really voice your opinion, these sliders allow you to do that. It truly is that simple. It doesn't have to be a ton of money, but I seriously, I think everybody should donate a little bit if you use the desktop and if you use Arch, donate to Arch.
Yeah,
whatever your distro is, support it.
Really, I think other distributions should do this.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, if you're an Arch guy and you're using Arch and you're not helping to support it, what the heck's wrong with you?
Yeah.
I mean, my opinion.
Yeah, they don't have a multimillionaire backing them.
I've given
like,
to puppy links. I give to anything you can.
Yeah.
I mean, that you use.
Yeah, like you would for commercial software.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't have to be ridiculous, but just, a little bit.
All right, let's wrap up the Ubuntu talk with one last story because I think it plays into an overall narrative that is interesting.
Yeah.
In an attempt to push Ubuntu as a gaming platform, they're reaching out to developers at the next Ubuntu Developer Summit later this month in Copenhagen. So as part of the Ubuntu 3.04 Developer Summit topics, they have a whole series of things. Now, there's not a lot of detail. You only have the title and the summaries at this point because it's early days.
Okay.
But I think the titles and summaries give away a lot of what Canonical is focusing on.
Okay.
Audio support, improving audio support on all fronts, longevity of binaries. Graphic support is a must. We must get it working extremely well in Ubuntu, specifically OpenGL.
Right.
No obvious surprises there.
Yeah.
This one I thought was interesting because Canonical's been really cagey about Unity's impact on performance to gaming.
Yeah.
And when Phoronix posts articles, they're like, oh, well, I don't go by Phoronix benchmarks. That's just so,
it's data.
It's a data point, if nothing else, right?
I mean, it's kind of,
Well, so what,
they can post a disputable alternative to it rather than talking about it. I mean,
right, yeah. All right, so check this out. One of the talks, Unity performance, and here's the summary. Unity costs about 10% in frame rate performance drop. Unity costs about 10% in frame rate performance drop when running a game. That right there is them basically admitting that all of a sudden Ubuntu is coming out and developing this gaming platform. It's being targeted by Humble Indie Bundle authors. It's being targeted by Kickstarters. It's being targeted by Valve. It's being targeted by Unity 3D. Oh, but guess what? That custom desktop we built, it causes games not to run that good. So they are, as a good platform owner they are definitely making efforts to address that.
Yeah, they are. And I'd say one really good start would be not to kill off Unity 2D. For me, that's such an obvious fix. I don't see why that was ever, that whole idea of killing it off, that would have solved the problem. To have the option of saying, hey, by the way, we just saved countless hours in development headaches. Boot into 2D, you're done.
That's why I selected Lubuntu this week.
Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah. Save that for the 12.10 review because I have some specific thoughts, and that's one of the points I want to bring up during the review. All right. Okay. One last story because it's awesome. Project Eternity, which is a game that's being developed on Kickstarter, and it's met its funding. Okay, so this is something that's already funded. It's already coming. And what's awesome about it is it's made by a really super talented team that really has a history of producing some great hits, including like of course I'm blanking on it now. Fallout 1 and 2.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Fallout New Vegas, right? I mean, these guys really know how to do a game. Yeah. They've done one of the Star Wars games, and they're bringing their new game to Linux. It's got Linux support, and there you go. Fallout 1 and 2, Fallout New Vegas. They've created. And Icewind Dale 1 and 2, Arcanium, and there was a good Star Wars one in there I wanted to catch. Oh, yeah? There you go, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2, nice. which is a beloved fan game. Yeah. So they got $3 million in funding, Matt. And these guys are making what looks like they want it to be one of the best RPGs released, and they're
clearly,
they've reached their funding goal, so they're coming out for Linux, and so we'll keep you guys posted on this. I just thought this was really exciting. And again, this also plays in the narrative. They're targeting Ubuntu, right? And I know that makes a lot of people uncomfortable, but these improvements that Canonical is going to make to Ubuntu are happening at lower levels. Right. It will trickle down to other distributions. This is just kind of how it has to happen. It's how the industry needs something to focus on, to tune and really dial something in.
And then it can trickle down to alternative desktops and then into alternative distributions completely from there. So, I mean, there's some options.
I'm really looking forward to this. We'll probably give it a review once it's released. And so they had it like some of the other folks. They had it early on. Once they hit 1.6 million, they decided to do Mac and Linux versions.
Right.
And now they're over 3 million in funding.
Yeah, so it's a no-brainer at this point.
Yeah. It's very, very cool. And we've had a lot of people talking about this game in the community. I got emailed by a few people, and a friend of the show is working on all of this. So go check this out, you guys, including there's a really, really great write-up over overclockers.com. They interviewed the Eternity folks, and just tons of really good info that got me massively excited for the game.
Maybe drop that link into the chat room there for them.
Totes.
Yeah. There we go.
Little live. So there's one link there. And then if you want to get in on the funding, it's still the Kickstarter project is still accepting funding. It has 55 hours to go, though.
Yeah, I mean, hey, show some support. It's cool.
You know, because if you buy it now that it's funded, you get the So I actually did. I funded it at here. I did $25.
Nice.
So I get a digital download copy of Project Eternity, and I figured that was good
cool.
for me.
Yeah, you get to play with it.
So I'll get an early download copy, then I'll review it here on the show.
Awesome.
All right, Matt.
Cool.
Well, that's all the news for this week. All right, Matt, it's time to review Ubuntu 12.10, which will be released a couple of days after this episode comes out. And we've got a lot of thoughts to say. Before we get started, I want to say thank you to the fine folks over at System 76 who are rocking support for this segment of the Linux Action Show. System 76 are the creators of some of the best laptops that run Linux, designed from the ground up to run Linux. You order one of those suckers, you're guaranteed things are going to work great, and if they're not, they'll work with you to make sure they are.
You bet.
System 76 sent us one of their great desktops, the Wild Dog Performance, which I might add runs Ubuntu 12.10. Just dandy.
It runs like a champ.
That's what a lot of their systems, Matt. You mentioned this before. Is when they build a box that not only do they target the current release, but they also want something they know is going to have good support down the road, too.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what they're doing when they build these PCs. They're looking in longevity.
They take the headache out of getting a nice Linux desktop going, which is really great.
Awesome.
All right, so let's talk about Ubuntu 12.10, Matt. Was it a headache? And do we recommend people upgrade? Stay tuned. We're going to get to all of that. But why don't we start with some of the essentials? What do you say?
All right, let's get to that.
Let's get to the nitty-gritties first. So Ubuntu 12.10 is shipping the Linux kernel 3.5.4.
Yes, it is.
And which has that DMA buff thing we mentioned. It has great improvement across the board. It's a really solid kernel. But I think that one of the major features that has been driving a lot of conversation has been the changes to Unity.
Yes. Oh, definitely. That's the big push.
Yeah. So I have well, it's kind of hard to see, but I have a 12.10 system, and I'll tweak that for you later. But we'll go through and I'll show you some of the changes that have shown up in the Unity dash. But probably the biggest one, and we'll just put this will be our final word for 12.10, is the Amazon integrations, and that whole shopping lens thing. Where do you stand now, Matt, after you've had some time to think about it?
Well, after I've had a chance to play with it, I mean, at the end of the day, if you don't like it, obviously you can remove it. But more importantly, is it adding value for both, Ubuntu users as well as the folks that are developing Ubuntu? And my immediate response is it is to a degree, but it could do so much better if they laser focused where it's being displayed and actually kept it to music and video only. Simple.
Oh, interesting.
I've said this before, and I'll say it again. It's the right idea, but too much of a good thing is a bad thing. And that's kind of what they're doing. It's not relevant. A lot of the stuff that comes up isn't relevant. It's not bad. It's just annoying and distracting.
Well, and that's the fundamental. I think that's the fundamental problem. Is the Amazon searches are not very relevant. So let's do a little thought experiment here in my Ubuntu 12.10 installation.
Okay.
All right, we'll bring up the dash lens here, and let's say I'll search for terminal, right?
Okay. Yeah. Let's do
terminal. Term, right? And I type in term, and what I have to give Canonical credit for Ubuntu is the application results and the local file results are obviously that search is running in a different thread than the Amazon, so you get your local results instantaneously. You don't wait for the Amazon.
Although that wasn't always the case. Initially, when they first instituted this, it was a bit slow because the caching wasn't really there yet. So they have improved that some. So now it's not irritating to use. It's just more off topic.
One of the interesting things about this whole shopping lens thing is because it doesn't query Amazon itself directly. It actually queries an API at Canonical. They're able to make improvements like the not safe for work filters and stuff like that on the back end. Without having to push any code changes.
Which is important because you're not dependent on someone else's API exclusively.
So now I've typed term. Obviously my first result was terminal. Right, sure. Which, as it should be. Then I also got some books and some audio down here. And this is an opportunity to show another feature in Dash. Is you can right-click on items and you can actually, there we go. Well, there's nothing available for that one. That was kind of a sticker.
But that's just, that particular item.
It depends on, you'd think the shopping stuff. Here we go. Here's one.
Yeah, for music, it works.
And what's great is this also, so here's a result. This one came from the Ubuntu One Music Store, and I can actually even preview the track here in the dash.
Oh, that's nice.
That's kind of nice, right? So now I'm playing on the music preview in the dash. That's good, but what you cannot get away from, and this is what's really the sneaker, is this kind of shopping is so dependent on intent by the user.
That's true. Exactly.
And to the point where if I'm in the music or video lens, I'm happy.
Yeah,
I'm happy to get some suggestions.
That's exactly it. And I was even willing to give allowances in the main area if it just stuck to what was relevant. I understand that not everybody's going to think to go to music and video lenses. I understand that. And I was willing to give some allowances there, but don't take away their own income by flooding us with books and stuff that have nothing to do with anything. There's no,
it's kind of cluttered up.
It's no value.
And
they're losing sales because of that.
You have to think too. It's gonna drive people away from Unity.
Yeah, or at least Dash, but I would think Unity as well.
Well, I mean, if you're not using Dash, why use Unity?
Yeah.
And why have the performance overhead and all of that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
I mean, so if I'm going down my list here, I'm like, okay, so my laptop will run cooler because I'm not pushing the GPU.
That's
I
true.
won't have Amazon search results showing up in my Dash, and my games run faster.
Yeah, no, that's really true.
I mean, think of what the combo that Canonical's sort of building themselves here, and it's so funny because they're putting so much effort and so much attention and so much energy and so much capital into Unity that they could be developing a platform that nobody wants to use because they keep spamming it up.
I think they need to refine what they have first and then move on to some of these next steps. And so I support what they're doing. I just think that they need to maybe slow it down just a little bit, refine what they already have, and then begin moving into these new things that they want to explore. And that's fine.
So let's go with the argument that they just feel there's not enough revenue generated from having it tucked away in the contextually appropriate lenses, where they could actually specifically only show video and only show audio because they're contextually aware of where you're at. Well, let's pretend like that didn't work.
Okay.
Here's where I think you could kind of refine it with maybe the next release of Ubuntu, because they're fleshing this stuff out with the 12.10 release.
Sure, of course.
What if in this more suggestions thing? So say I type Chrome here, and let's pretend for a moment I don't have Chrome installed. What would be really great is if instead of having Amazon results for Cologne show up,
exactly,
is if as a user I could choose maybe to have that more suggestions field fall back to Google, or fall back to a Twitter search, or a Google Plus search,
some social stuff, definitely.
Or maybe all of the above, and the Google and the Ubuntu API would then aggregate it. Why not make what shows up in that more suggestions area of the Dash user selectable? And maybe by default, Canonical ships it with the Amazon lens.
Makes sense.
But then in that area where I'm in here and I can turn it off, so this might be worth showing. So if we, you can go into system settings and you can go to privacy, right? And you can say under privacy, I don't want to have, right here, I don't want to have online search results, right?
You can turn that off.
Which will turn off any lens that goes online, any of the Google Docs stuff, which is part of the features, and all of that will go away.
Right.
What about instead changing this dialog to say, my default more suggestions lens is, and maybe ship it with Amazon, but then let me go in there as a user and say, nah, I want it to be Gwibber.
And I would think that's possible. I mean, it's not nearly as heavy-handed. And again, we realize that this is still in development and these things could happen. So that's cool. But I think for the time being, having that option would allow more control and would, again, translate into more purchases, which is good. That's money in the pocket.
Because if I want it there, my intent is more likely to use it.
Yeah.
Right? So I would like to, that would be a direction.
Because intent does matter. And quite frankly, operating system developers may not be the best judges for buyer intent. I'm just saying.
I've been running 12.10 since beta 1 now.
Yeah.
And once they introduced the Amazon stuff, I've opted to leave it on.
Okay.
After this review, I think I will be doing a purge remove.
Yeah.
But that said, I plan to donate to Canonical.
Exactly. See, that's where I'm at too. I would probably be more likely to just remove it and then just make an actual contribution to the operating system, which I'm enjoying. That's something I enjoy the experience. I want to support that, but not with. I don't want to reward poor implementation.
And I think as people migrate over to 12.10, this is going to have a lot of negative reaction. I've already been following conversation threads in the Ubuntu forums and in the Ubuntu subreddit, and people are very hostile to this.
And I would defend Ubuntu in and I want to state this as clear as possible. This is only for this release. This very likely 90% of this is going to be corrected by the following release. So all the feedback and negative feedback or positive feedback they're getting, they're going to probably take that into account. And I'll give them points for that.
Shouldn't Canonical maybe put on their big boy pants now and have a little restraint and not ship something until it's ready? Why not hold this for one more rev internally and work on it? Why not deploy it maybe on your internal employee workstations or something like that and flesh it out? Maybe
I think they feel like they can get more greater feedback.
Oh, sure.
I mean, I think the one thing that
absolutely.
they could do differently is they need to be much more clear.
So you make it optional in this one. You turn it on, and then you get refinement, and then in the next release, you turn it on by default.
Exactly. And I think if they actually made it more clear as to the fact that a long-term release is really where you want to be at if you want a really stable experience. These tend to be basically beta releases, really. I mean, at the end of the day, they kind of are. They're testing grounds. They just don't explain that real well.
So let's talk about another controversial change.
Okay.
They're dropping Unity 2D. And Unity 2D was sort of a complete rewriting of Unity in Qt that didn't require 3D acceleration graphics. It was. And you would essentially fall back to it gracefully if you didn't have 3D support.
Yeah.
In fact, sometimes without a few little hints, you might not even realize, one more thing. Canonical added a legal notice button.
Yeah, this is interesting. I think this had to do with their EU issues.
When you open up your dash and before you click it, it actually just says legal notice right there.
Yeah, that's really...
It is... I mean, if that's not... Are they not valuing the way the dash looks and how important that screen is?
Well, and what I found more interesting is I support the idea of a legal notice. I know that's your legal department doing what they got to do. I understand that. But why, instead of having me open this up in a browser or a file manager or whatever it may be, why not have it actually render in the dash itself?
I don't think the dash does wait.
Well, do it as text.
No, it does. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I was going to say it does. I mean, there's no reason not to. So that way, and then it looks better than opening up yet another instance, which in this case is a browser.
I would like to see this idea refined and maybe get worked on. All right. So back to Unity 2D.
Okay.
So you've mentioned that it kind of puts out people with older machines.
It does.
Out in the field. Now, here's what they're doing though, Matt, that I think is pretty interesting. Have you tried it on a 2D only machine? They do something kind of neat. Fedora, they're using a trick that Fedora came up with for GNOME 3.
Okay.
And they're using a backend technology called LLVM and LLVM pipe.
Okay.
And this allows OpenGL calls to be taken and rasterized on the CPU and then sent back. So what they're actually doing on the fly now, you actually get what it actually is it's more Unity for everybody.
Right.
You get the same Unity experience now, regardless if you have a 2D chipset or a 3D chipset. They both will run. However, and I noticed this in my testing, it does slow down.
Yeah.
Because your CPU rendering that stuff.
Yeah, and see and now I give them points for the fact that is more unifying than having two separate completely, 2D, 3D. I mean, that certainly sticks to the Unity theme, but adding more overhead again is, it's...
Yeah.
But here's the idea that I had. It was a very simple idea. When I wrote an article at Datamation here recently, one of the things I said that would automatically address this issue is, I'm not saying you need to continue with Unity 2D. I understand the resources could be better spent elsewhere.
Right.
But during the installation say, oh, hey, look, I've noticed you're running a computer that's slow as molasses. Might we suggest while we're fetching packages, fetch an alternative desktop
Get
manager?
LXD going?
Yeah. I mean, only based on those resources available. I mean, just, again, newbies aren't going to know this stuff. So those options are nice to consider for a future release, perhaps.
And I wondered what was at first, because in my desktop that I tested on, I have a Dell XPS 410 that I decided to run this on just because I knew that machine would have a little wonkiness. And I wanted to introduce a little wonkiness, right? And so I threw Ubuntu 12.10 on there, and I noticed the performance. This is a quad-core Intel Core 2 with 4 gigs of RAM. And so it's not rocking. It's, it's a few years old now.
Yeah.
And it was like menus were slow to open, and the Unity dash was so slow to type in that I thought, I'm not going to be able to use this.
Right.
Video gaming was not possible.
Right, exactly.
However, it all worked, right? And as like a real simple user, I might not even notice.
Right.
Once I did turn on the proprietary AMD ATI graphics, huge improvement. Yeah, huge improvement. I mean, it was like, I'm running on an SSD. Why is this so slow? What is so wrong? And I didn't realize just out of the box it was using the 2D driver.
Exactly.
So I'm impressed that it works.
Yeah.
And I acknowledge that because Fedora is working on this, and that's how they do GNOME 3 fallback for Fedora, that there's going to be a lot of people working on this, and this is going to get better.
Oh, absolutely.
And CPUs are going to get better.
And I believe that.
And graphics drivers are going to get better. So this is sort of like, what this is Canonical saying, we wouldn't have shipped this for long-term support.
No, of course not. And also
but we think maybe by 13.10 or something we can.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, the goal of, supporting modern machines, I'm all on board with that. And I'm all on board with a more unified setup, for sure. I completely understand that. I just wish there was more dialogue during the installation, before the installation. There was more disclaimer. There was more explanation. A lot of people that are coming to the forums and complaining aren't aware of the whys and the hows and all these details. I'm not saying for them to knock the stuff off. I'm saying have a conversation before they start hitting the download button. That's all I'm saying.
Right.
You know, I'm not knocking them at all. I think a lot of what they're doing is very cool. I think some of it has some room to grow, but it's cool. You know, no problem.
So let's talk about web app integration. So here I've got Firefox, and it just shows up really quick for you video viewers.
Yeah.
If you look, there's a pop-up that now it's not coming up. Let's try OMG Ubuntu.
Yeah.
OMG Ubuntu, I think, has this too. There's a little pop-up that comes up. There you go.
There it is.
Would you like to install OMG Ubuntu for extra features and quicker access? And if I say yes,
right,
and this is in Firefox, but they also have a plugin for Chrome, it adds an OMG Ubuntu icon to the launcher.
Oh, that's
right?
cool. I like that.
And on some stuff, like on, I bet, so let's try this. Let's just see. If I go over to Gmail,
okay,
I think it'll do it. Yeah, so would you like to install it for Gmail? So I say install, right? Okay, so there I go. So now I've installed this for Gmail, and I should get another pop-up here in my bar.
Right.
Well, I should. Maybe I didn't. See, sometimes it pops away too fast, and you don't get a chance to click it. It's a little glitchy. Once you load it, though, for the Gmail one, it'll even give you like your unread count in the sidebar of the launcher and stuff like that for Gmail.
I like that.
And they're working to extend that so that then in the dash, you can do things like you'd be able to search for docs in here. So you can start doing Google Docs searches integrated into the dash.
Cool.
So they're really trying to, and the other thing it does is it integrates in now with the Me menu as well. So some different web apps will have different statuses integrated in the Messages menu.
That I like. Okay.
This is step one in bridging that gap. So if you're a big Gmail user, a big Google Docs user, a web apps user in general, they're trying to kind of make unify the step between the desktop and the web apps by making
I think is cool.
By sort of integrating the management of your web apps into your desktop interface. It's a good idea, and the reason why I think it's a great idea is because these types of online web applications like Google Docs and Gmail and Office 3, whatever you want to call it, right?
Sure.
These are enabling the adoption of Linux at a rate that is just as important as gaming is because you don't have to worry about installing desktop software. You don't have to worry about Windows compatibility anymore because it all runs in the web app. So I think this is actually, while maybe some people are like, Google Docs, put my nose up at that, I think for Joe User.
Yeah, exactly. Joe User, the person that's used to clicking on the big Word icon on their desktop, having that in the dash like that, or having that on wherever they happen to have it installed, however that works, being able to have that shortcut and being able to click that, they can associate with that. They can process that and say, "Oh, that's my Word, that's my Excel." That's they're able to put that together versus, "Oh, I would rather use such and such and so and so." Well, yeah, that option's available to you, but this is cool for average folks.
Let's talk about one other thing they did that's kind of interesting. I'm wondering if other distros will start making this choices. Ubuntu now, especially in 12.10, is moving to really customized Nautilus.
Yeah,
now, they're not going as far as the Mint team, and they're not releasing Nemo or something like that, although maybe they'll use it.
No, they could.
They are actually using a one rev older version of Nautilus than what's available now because they didn't like a few things like they got rid of this extras pane in the new Nautilus. And
I'm glad they kept.
It's nice to move files between folders
kind of
with
a big
that.
deal to me. So.
But the other thing you might notice is they've really customized the toolbar here, and too much, in my opinion. Too much.
It's a little overdone, but it's still fine. It's,
it's clean. I think this is one of the more interesting question marks in what is Ubuntu going to do in the future is what are they going to do with Nautilus? Because they've come out publicly saying that they're not happy with the direction that the GNOME team plans to take files, aka Nautilus. And they need to do something different. But they haven't been clear. Are they going to take something like Thunar and make it better? Well, are they going to fork this?
But I think this is where you got to be careful. They've got so much invested in Unity and all these other things that taking on yet another project and then taking on customizing a file manager, they have finite resources. And so they really need to be careful. Maybe the better approach is to say, how much do they dislike Nautilus? Maybe they do need to look at what Linux Mint's doing and borrow from them, because then that's less resources being used.
Chatroom says they need to look at Marlin.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. So finding an existing project alternative would be a smart approach. And then if they can make minor tweaks to it to get that integration they're looking for, then cool. But don't invest a ton of resources into it. I think that would be foolish in the long run. And I don't think they will. I think they're smarter than that.
I think at the end of my month or so with Ubuntu 12.10, I still find that Ubuntu, the default install, I still personally do a lot of tweaking. My tweaking though is changing. I'm less about the theme.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I haven't even mentioned the theme. When I like the theme, I don't complain about it. And when I don't like the theme, it's like half the review.
Yeah, for me, themes are, for most users, I think themes are so easily changed these days. They're almost a mood issue.
I know I should agree with you. I know I should. People always write in and tell me, why do you care how the default theme looks? You can change it easily, and you're right. But for me, it says something about the people behind the distribution, about the quality of that they care how it looks. And
I think icons are important. It's the wallpaper that I don't get too hung up on.
And I know I almost sound like a stupid Mac user when I say stuff like this, but look at these fonts. Look how good those fonts look.
Right, yeah.
Look how good this is Linux, Matt. Look how good those fonts look.
They look really sharp.
Look at the fonts in the file manager. Look at how everything looks like this is a professionally polished design product. This looks like a top grade product.
Yeah.
From end to finish, they still have a little brown, but there's more purples and oranges in here.
Yeah.
I really think they have a fantastic look going. They ship with some great default wallpapers too.
They do. Yeah, I'll give them some good points on that. Some really attractive ones.
And I think overall, and what strikes me is, as Mark said when he announced Ubuntu 12.10, is they were going to focus on quality.
Right.
And they were going to, and the other thing is they were going to move the visual theme ahead a little bit, but they're just getting started. And if this is just getting started, I'm ready for more. I think this looks great.
I think that's the right approach. Anytime they start moving ahead with stuff, I get a little nervous. But then I remember, I can always. Every time there's a release, I can wait a little bit before I upgrade, and usually that handles anything that gets missed along the way.
Let's talk about that. Let's transition to that. Yeah. So should people upgrade from Ubuntu 12.04 to Ubuntu 12.10?
No, absolutely not. And here's why. All the real big, huge changes that are coming to 12.10, a lot of them anyway, are undoubtedly going to be released in, what'd you say, it was like a 0.2 or something like that that's coming out for 12.04.
And like we covered in the news segment, there's a lot of great features that are being backported to 12.04.
So all the stuff that you're wanting is going to be available to you in the long-term release. So at this point, there's no real advantage to that, in my opinion. And if anything, it's going to give them more time to refine any bugs by the time you see it.
I still wonder if that's true. I've been seeing in bug reports and things like that Valve is working a lot with Canonical on 12.10.
Yeah.
So I wonder if there's been more things streamlined into 12.10. I think we're going to have to wait for benchmarks to show that out.
Yeah.
I pretty much agree with you across the board.
Now, if you're gaming, okay. If you're gaming 12.10, I could see the advantage there. But if you're just a desktop person like myself, I don't have any real reason to.
Well, that's true. Here's what I would say. If you're a Unity desktop user, you might want to consider the upgrade.
Oh, yeah.
Even with the shopping lens, you can turn it off, turn it on.
Yeah.
Unity's seen considerable performance improvements again. During my testing, video game performance went from unplayable to totally playable during testing. And if you combine Unity with an SSD, you really start to see things pop. And it really starts to feel like a very, very, very responsive desktop. That's great. So if you're a Unity user, I think 12.10 is a slam dunk for you.
Yeah.
The problem is they kind of have the XP problem. I think 12.04 was one of the best releases Canonical has ever had. And the web stats and all of this bear this out. 12.04 has seen an incredible adoption.
It has.
And 12.04 is so great if you're an Ubuntu user that I don't know what the compelling reason to upgrade is if you're not a Unity user.
That's exactly my philosophy on it. I cannot recommend enough just sticking with where you're at. Let it stew for a little bit. I'm not saying 12.10 isn't worth looking at. I'm just saying give it at the very least, give it a couple of months to get all the stuff worked out, because there's going to be more stuff coming down the road.
I would have loved to have been able to say, this is finally the release of Ubuntu where I don't have to do things like load Chrome and swap out applications. Yeah. It's not that yet. It's also not the release where I'm giving up Synapses. I'm still running. Yeah. I'm still using an alternative launcher because I can get apps typed and loaded and launched faster than I can in the dash. And as long as that's the case, I'm going to use a different launcher, which means my dash usage is down a lot. Now, I still use it, but
it's cool to show people, and I think for some folks it's definitely worth using, but I think for advanced users, it's hard to bring myself to spend much time with it.
See, in 12.04, I have this really great setup where I have my Gwibber stuff integrated into the lenses so I can do Twitter replies. I mean, I really like my workflow there, and I want to see if I can replicate it in 12.10. Here's what I'm doing.
Okay.
For my gaming rig, I'm going to stay 12.10.
Yeah, okay.
And for my work laptop, I'm going to stay 12.04.
There you go. And that's exactly how I would do it, because one's basically stability and one's more cutting edge.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to, kind of see where things bear out. I'm curious to see how some of the benchmarks. Right now, the early benchmarks show things as pretty much a wash, with 12.10 having a very minor performance lead in most cases.
Right.
And I think, I think if as we see more benchmarks, I'll have more of a conclusion on that. I'm sort of holding and waiting.
Yeah. No, I would agree with that. I think that's kind of the best approach to it. I think it's just to really that's your takeaway.
So there you go. So by the way, I've linked in the show notes articles that explain a little bit extra stuff, including who was it that did there was I don't even know what website this is, but MacAchaser.com had 10 things to do after installing Ubuntu 12.10. Install media codecs. It's all these things that you still kind of have to do. Also, just to mention is Ubuntu One. Still, I very sparingly use Ubuntu One, primarily use Dropbox, although honestly, Dropbox sometimes is a little flaky under Linux for me. Ubuntu One's added some nice features. First of all, it's very, very easy to use. You just right-click, you can do sharing, and you can generate links now. So you can link things that are in your folders to people through Ubuntu One, which is very nice. So the integration with Ubuntu One continues, and it just is slowly getting better.
Well, and if you're able to not have bandwidth caps, obviously, and you have enough resources to do so, it's also a great way to back up your home folder.
Yes, it is.
And there's
specifically that's what I use it for.
There's some fine print there, but if you're running fiber, it's worth it.
Yes. Oh, yes. In fact, why don't we just mention it? Because I don't know if we've mentioned the 12.04 review. If you go into settings and you look, they have a backup utility that comes integrated in, and this is one of the number one questions sent into the Linux Action Show from new users: is how do I back up under Linux? Yeah. And they've really done it. You just go right here to backup, and you can turn on automatic backups. It'll go right into Ubuntu One. It's very easy to set up and schedule. You can select what folders you want backed up. Yep. I like. You can also change. You can change the storage back end to an SSH connection or a Windows share if you want, but Ubuntu One's the default.
And if you're a newbie, you're looking at an attached hard drive, or you're looking at Ubuntu One. If you're an advanced user, you're looking at SSH or maybe something along that line. So.
And just one tip for you folks out there who want to enable the additional drivers, where you can get proprietary drivers like your wireless or your video card. Yeah. That's moved to kind of a strange location in 12.10. This is just kind of a public service announcement. Go into system settings and go to software sources.
I'm not in love with it.
I don't know why they put it in software sources. And also, by the way, the software sources dialog takes way, way too long to open up now. I don't know if it's doing some sort of update in the background.
It's got to be updating something or.
And then the last tab in software sources is additional drivers.
I'll bet you that's why it takes longer to upload.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah, because it's checking for those.
Yeah, I bet you're right. So that's silly. But that's where it's at. It took me a little bit to find that.
Yeah,
but
it's worth checking out.
All right, everyone. Well, that's the Linux Action Show's look at Ubuntu 12.10. Let us know what you thought. Send us in an email, linuxactionshow@jupiterbroadcasting.com. Give us a little mini review, and we'll maybe read it in next week's episode of the Linux Action Show. All right, there's our review. Now that brings us to the end of this week's broadcast, Matt. Now, before we get out of here, what do you say we read a little bit of emails?
Let's hear it.
First one comes in from the subreddit, from Chili5771577. It says, big thanks to Matt for recommending the preload daemon. Just want to say thank you, Matt, for recommending preloader on the show a few weeks back as a way of boosting performance. I put it on my Ubuntu 12.04 install, and it's making a really noticeable increase. It made me wonder, though, why doesn't it just come as default on most distros? Is there a downside I'm not seeing?
Well, it's adding overhead. I mean, at the end of the day. So it just really depends on your system as to whether or not it's a good match or not. So that's something, and sometimes just testing it out for yourself, because there's no real clear guideline.
Turn it on, and if you notice improvement, keep it on.
There's kind of rules against it, but are rules for it and against it, and so on and so forth. But I recommend you can check it out. If it's not a match, then dump it. No big deal.
There you go. Next email came in from Mark, and Mark says, hi, I enjoyed your interview with the OpenShot developer. I'm looking forward to more interviews like these. Could you be more focused on applications like these rather than distros? Like Linus said, people don't really use OS distros. People, for the most part, use applications to get stuff done.
True.
Keep up the good work.
I agree.
I agree, too. And in fact, we have quote-unquote themes for our seasons that we kind of roughly stick to.
Oh, yeah.
And Matt and I both agree that it seems like we should probably focus a little more on the application level for this season, less on the distro, less on the OS, and focus more on using applications on Linux and using those applications to get things done.
Right.
And with Steam coming out imminent, and with which I would not be surprised if the next episode isn't about Steam. Really.
Yeah. Oh, I would be shocked.
And Lightworks.
Lightworks is another big one.
And of course, when big releases like Fedora come out, we're still going to talk about them this season. But I agree. Let's focus on just having fun with Linux and getting stuff done. And we've talked a lot about distros. We can go back to that. We can do that. But I think it's time to userland. Let's play on userland for a little bit.
Software and tasks.
Now that said, I still have a pimping your server segment that we're working on that I've just been waiting to slot in. That's not exactly, but it's application stuff.
It's task oriented. Yeah, it's task oriented. Yeah.
So there you go. So look forward to that, you guys. Now, this next email came in from Russia. Bakhtriv.
Okay.
Bakhtriv from Russia.
Cool.
From Russia writes, "Hello guys, as an Ubuntu user, I always get compass errors when changing settings, and it ends up crashing. The only choice for me is to summon the console," and he wants to let people know in case they have this problem.
Oh, okay.
Using Control-Alt-F1. But as a beginner, I didn't even know about that command.
Right.
Until now, my simple solution was to use Kill 9 in the console, and then restart, and it usually comes back. I think this information might be helpful for beginners, he goes on to say.
I would agree. That's actually a good tip.
If your compass is crashing like that, you probably have some video driver issues.
I would say so.
You shouldn't have that happen.
Yeah, check for an update or just don't use compass.
Now, this one should be good for any new users out there who've been stumped on how to extract RARs on Linux. So Alan with an E writes in. He says, "First off, great show. Keep up the loads of work. Now for the question. I've been having a tough time finding a nice GUI archiving app in Linux. Specifically, I use Ubuntu 12.04. I'm looking for one that can do RAR files. Uncompressing a single RAR file is not an issue. The trouble I have is when I need to uncompress multiple RAR file archives into a single file. As an example, I download that open source movie Elephant Stream. Right now, I have the RAR file, and I move it over to a shared partition over the network, I reboot my computer into Windows, and I use WinRAR to extract that file. Any help you guys could give me would be greatly appreciated."
Unrar would be,
So here's where I think...
but he's talking about doing multiple...
Well, I think Unrar will do that, but where he's getting tripped up is you have to install the Unrar package in order for your GUI archive manager to be able to support RAR.
Right.
So what you're seeing is it doesn't look like your archive manager supports RAR, when in reality you just need to get the RAR package installed. Right. I've listed in the show notes what packages those are.
Yeah.
If that sounds complicated to you and you're not quite tracking what I'm saying, there's also a nice little GUI version called pzip for Linux, and I've got debs and RPMs in the show notes. You can go grab it, and it is a GUI to manage RAR files on Linux. They also make it available for Windows, and this will also do multiple files.
Well, that's cool. Okay, so you get some management there. Nice.
I would just install Unrar from your package manager, and then just use the built-in archiver.
That's what I would do. But I think for someone that wants a little more going on, this is an option too.
pzip might be fun, and it's
cool.
It's free, so why not?
Yeah.
All right, Matt. Last email that came into the show this week: Brazilian schools run Linux. Hi, Chris. Hi, Matt. I want to ask you to show information. He's got kind of a bad accent here. Please, I ask you to show all about the distro Linux Educational for education used in Brazilian schools for improving, you guessed it, educations. Linux is used in almost all forms of Brazilian government.
Yeah, I knew that. No, the huge in Brazil. I mean,
yes. So check this out. For you video folks out there, we're going to have a little YouTube video if it loads. Maybe YouTube.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't think YouTube wants to load for us here.
Apparently not.
But it has a really interesting kind of kid-oriented UI that I thought was really
neat. Is it like
neat.
Ubuntu or?
I don't actually know what it's based off of. I just saw this email this morning, and I decided to include it when I saw the really kind of Look at YouTube. YouTube is being so awesome right now. Google Air.
Downtube.
Well.
Okay.
Oh well, we'll have
a.
If you guys want to check it out, we have a link in the show notes. But yeah,
that's cool.
He also showed they have some hardware devices in their different areas that run Linux.
Well, and I give them as a country as a shout out for using Linux in general. Is that they are, and we've talked about this before. We're talking about the video editing stuff. Oh well, they only use it for 3D stuff. No, they don't. They use it everywhere.
So look at
really
this UI. This to me looks like it's KDE based, and they've got like this really easy to use panel up there that has all the stuff the students need, and they've got the apps preloaded that are specific for the students. It kind of has
they got some really creative approaches. Yeah. I love it. It looks good.
So very cool, and thank you for emailing in. I love to hear how Linux is used in schools. That's a personal passion of mine.
Definitely.
All right, Matt. Well, that, I think, wraps up this show. Now, if you want to contact us, go over to jupiterbroadcasting.com. You can click the contact link at the top of the show. You can email us, linuxactionshow@jupiterbroadcasting.com, or even better, start a thread over in our Reddit over at linuxactionshow.reddit.com.
Yup.
Anything you want to plug before we get out of here?
You can always find me at matthartley.com. I have a link in the show notes specifically to recovering lost Ubuntu passwords, which is actually easier than you might think. And, of course, you can always find me at Datamation and at datamation.com. Look for the open source channel.
Yes. I want to give a plug to my buddy Michael from Coder Radio, which episode next week, I believe, is going to be on processes. And that might sound boring, but he's got a very interesting take on it. So tune into Coder Radio for that. Now, Mike has an app. It's a GitHub client called Code Journal.
Oh, cool. Okay.
It's a very well done app, but it is only Mac. It's Mac only.
Oh, okay.
So I got to put that warning out there. But I want to make the call. If you have a Mac or if you know someone who's a Mac user that uses Git, please tell them about Code Journal. He kind of got the bone recently, and I want to give him a nice plug. He didn't, he's not paying me or anything. I really respect the work he's doing, and he needs a shout out because he's kind of getting the Apple wiener just a little bit.
Okay.
This cool app for OS 10 allows you to monitor your GitHub activity feed, create both public and private Gits, and you can also edit them, and you can track projects and get notifications when updates are done. If you're a Mac OS 10 Mountain Lion user, it automatically integrates in with the Mountain Lion notification center.
Oh, that's sweet. Okay,
yeah,
cool.
And if you've got for example, our Google, our browser extensions are up on GitHub.
Right.
You could use this client and it'll notify you anytime something happens on that project. So if you follow a few projects on GitHub, it's really nice. It's also has native sharing, but that's only available in 10.8.
Sure.
And he's always adding new features. It's only $4.99. It's available from his website over at codejournalapp.com. It's also available in the Mac App Store. Now
Sounds
I know
like a no-brainer.
a lot of you that's not applying to you, and you're like, Chris, why?
But I mean, I use Linux almost exclusively, but we have a Mac in my home. I mean, a lot of people do.
Yeah.
So
please go give our buddy Michael some support. Coder Radio is awesome, and he needs a little help right now.
Yeah.
All right, Matt. Well, so for the folks that are watching live, we're gonna get off. We're gonna stop recording, then we're gonna go vote on our JB titles. People that watch live get to help us submit title suggestions to the show during the chat room. So we always encourage you guys to join us live over at jblive.tv at 10 a.m. Pacific, which is noon Eastern.
Yeah.
And you can get the audio at jblive.info. So there you have it.
Yep.
All right, everyone. Well, thanks so much for tuning to this week's episode of the Linux Action Show. And we'll be right back here next week.
Start the camera.
He's about to do the jump. If we could jump with him. Ready? Oh, my God!
Chopper away.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. But that puts it in perspective.
There he goes!